Today we're analyzing Lorenzo Zurzolo, who is an Italian actor, and this guy gets comments on his eyes all the time, so clearly there's something to them. So we're going to jump right into his front profile and figure that out. So firstly, we'll look at eye spacing, which Lorenzo has perfect eye separation ratio of 47%. This is on the higher end of the ideal, but this is still perfect eye spacing in this regard. And his eyes are also about exactly one eye apart, which this is perfect again. And also his intercanthal distance visually looks pretty good. So his eye spacing is really good as it gets. I think 47% is a pretty aesthetic value. So his eye spacing is really good. He has a 7-degree canthal tilt. So 7 degrees, which fits in that 6 to 9 degree range that is preferred for men. So this is quite a good canthal tilt. So his eyes are well spaced, well tilted. Now the first flaw we see is that his eye aspect ratio is a little bit on the low end of 2.6 to 1. So ideally you want it in that 3 to 3.8 range. So his scleral show makes his eye aspect ratio a bit more rounded than you'd want. We can see in this image as well. And this is what people are referring to when they say he has quote unquote dead eyes, or whatever other terms are similarly used. So that's sort of his main objective flaw in the eye region. Now what I notice is that his eye region overall is still quite good. I think when people have one flaw in an otherwise perfect area, it kind of enhances it sometimes, as far as people noticing it or liking it. It's sort of like Tom Cruise with the nose. Sometimes too perfect doesn't look good. I think he would still look better with a better eye shape, but I don't think it hurts his attractiveness too much, considering his eye region overall. So we'll look at his brows. His brows are quite low set with minimal distance from his eyes. In this image, there's literally no distance, basically. So quite low set brows. It is worth noting that they are a little bit too upturned at about 15 degrees. Ideally they should be more about 9, but not a big deal at all. The density of his brows is also fantastic. They're very dark and dense. You can see that in most photos. Really good. So yeah, his eye area as a whole is quite good. I'd say it's about in that 7.5 to 8 range. It's pretty good. Now, of course, he takes off the general facial proportions as well. His facial width height ratio is 1.9, which of course is what you would expect. Most attractive faces do have a high one. It's sort of rare that I find an attractive face without a high facial width height ratio, so no surprise there. He has equal facial thirds with the tallest lower third, which is ideal. Anything else? Oh yeah, his cheekbones are quite high set. Use this photo for reference. They're kind of not very protrusive or prominent, but his cheekbones are pretty close to his eyes and are high set. Definitely a very aesthetic trait. A general facial proportion that is a flaw is that his total face shape is a little bit short at 1.3 times taller than wide, and ideally you do want it in that 1.33 to 1.38 range. So that's a small flaw in this front profile. Anything else that's worth noting? I think it's time we look at his jaw, which I would say is the aspect of his face that holds him back generally. So firstly, we'll check the width. So his bigonial width is about 84%. And this is a little bit of a flaw. You do want an 88% bigonial width ideally. So his bigonial width is a little bit narrow, a little bit of a narrow jaw. It's not super narrow, but you can see that the contour is good, but it comes in a little bit too much overall. Now he does have a very good chin to philtrum ratio of 2.5 to 1, which this is basically perfect, exact what you want. So his chin is very proportionate to his philtrum and tall, which that's really good. Anything else to note? His jaw frontal angle is 87 degrees, which is good. Exactly what you want. It's within the ideal range of 85 to 95. So it shows a good inclination of his jaw from the front profile. Other than that, for the front profile, I'd say there's not much more worth noting. Overall, his front profile scored quite a good score, really higher than I was expecting actually, an 85% harmony score. So that's quite a good score. That is nearly in the top model range, I'd say. However, his overall score is definitely not an 8.5. So we'll go into the side profile. Now his side profile, we see the first issues. So his gonal angle is pretty obtuse at 132 degrees. And this is definitely his biggest flaw in the side profile, is an obtuse gonal angle. And we saw that his jaw frontal angle was ideal here. And that adds up because his mandibular plane angle is 17 degrees, which is ideal. So his inclination is ideal, which adds up because that makes sense with the front profile. But his gonal angle is not ideal. So essentially, if his ramus was more like this, it would be more ideal. He has great convexity measurements, so his profile flatness is top tier, really. So his normal facial convexity measurements 172 degrees, which is exactly what you want, a very flat profile. He has good brow assessments. His nasofrontal angle is masculinized at 122 degrees. His brow ridge inclination is also good at 24 degrees. That's on the upper end, but still good. A slope back forehead never hurts. Always normally have a more prominent frontal bone, which then leads to your profile being flat. So that's quite good. His nose assessments are good. It's perfectly projected and tall. He has a very aesthetic philtrum right here. It comes down, goes out. So that's very aesthetic, and that also, leads to a good nasolabial angle of 111 degrees, which is ideal. His lip assessments are all good but one. So his hold away H-line is a little bit of a fail because we'll use this. His lower lip goes through a little bit. The other ones, ideal. And his E-line, I'd say it's pretty ideal proportionally. So yeah, lip assessments are good. His side profile is generally pretty good. The one thing worth noting is that he does have a neutral orbital vector. It's worth noting, but it's also really not worth noting. Not really a big deal. Essentially, his main flaw in the side profile is really only the gonal angle. Otherwise, it's pretty good. It's really the only issue. So, unfortunately, the gonal angle is quite important for your facial harmony. So he did get deducted pretty hard, and his side profile score is 73%. Still a solid score. And something that's worth noting, when you have a big flaw in the back end of your side profile, this part of his side profile is still quite good. It kind of reflects higher than 73%, if that makes sense. So still an excellent side profile. So his total facial harmony is exactly 80%. 80% facial harmony, which is pretty good. That's pretty good. That's what you would expect in many top actors. So now we can kind of estimate a total score. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So first we want to look at his facial angularity. So here we can see some good cheek leanness. and some good jaw angularity. Now, from the side profile, his ramus is normally always hidden, and there's not much jaw definition, which I've noticed is pretty consistent. But his front profile is pretty good, so I gave him a 7, which I think is pretty fair. It is a little bit under. It's not what you would expect in an 8 out of 10 face. It is a little bit under that, so I gave him a 7 here. I think that's pretty fair. Again, it's not really quantifiable though. The other metrics are quantifiable. So for his sexual dimorphism, I calculated that out at a 7. So he got a 10 in the nose, a 7.5 in eyes, and a 5 in the jaw. So the main reason I had to deduct from his jaw dimorphism is his chin shape is quite rounded. His gonadal angle, as we mentioned, is very feminized. His jaw width is a little bit narrow, another feminizing trait. And his ramus lacks a little bit of length. So I gave him about a 5 in the jaw for dimorphism. So his overall dimorphism is a 7, which I think is pretty fair. And then lastly, we have to calculate his features. So from the front profile, So something worth noting is his nasal dorsum is a little bit bulbous from the front, a little bit. So I knocked off half a point for that. The chin shape and the kind of curved appearance here, I took a point off for that. And then the infraorbital support and eye bags, I took a point for that. So we got a 7.5 in miscellaneous features. And his overall score is a 7.5 out of 10. And I would say this is pretty fair. I think his exact rarity is about, it's anywhere between about, I think it's about 1 in 500 roughly, a 1 in 500 face. I think his range does trend down from 7.5. Like I wouldn't say he's a 7.5 to 8. I'd more say he's more like arguably a 7.25 to 7.5. So yeah, still quite a good looking face. He's in the 1 in hundreds for sure. That's his rarity. No more, no less, I wouldn't say. And yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this analysis, and tons of more videos to come. The FaceIQ rating chart will be coming out, rating subscribers, some other exciting faces. So yeah, guys, I'll see you next time.